Good morning. My name is Rabbi Haim Beliak. I'm the CEO of Friends of Jewish Renewal in Poland. It's my privilege this morning to welcome you to a special report on behalf of Beit Polska, two very important programs. One part of our traditional work of progressive Jews in Poland that'll be part of the program that will be discussed by Dominika Zakrzewska, and the second part by Jonathan Mills, a special part of our Ukraine relief effort. At this time, I'd like to introduce my friend who is in Warsaw along with Jonathan Mills. Dominika happens to be in Greece, I think, at this moment. And we want to welcome our panelists. There's going to be an opportunity for people to ask questions of each of the presenters. And I want to call your attention to the bottom of the panel where it says interpretation. This is an opportunity for you to turn to that and choose the language that you are most comfortable in hearing the presentation. There is simultaneous translation into the other language if you're on one or the other. So I'm going to English myself, and now I'd like to ask the chair of Beit Polska, Marek Jozowski, to introduce our panelists and welcome you.
Hello, friends. I'm speaking to you from Warsaw. My name is Marek, and I represent Beit Polska, which is an umbrella organization for Jewish communities in Poland. We are a structure that is member of the World Union for Progressive Judaism, which brings together Reform communities around the world. Now, we have been active in rebuilding our communities after the pandemic reduced us for substantial time. I'm sure you're busy with similar undertakings in your communities if you are a member. Let me just mention the fact that in addition to focusing on our people and our community, we're also not just having to, but we have the heart to help Ukrainian refugees. And I'm referring to the Ukrainians displaced in Poland over the past 120 days as a result of the hostilities or invasion, as some of us would call it, of Russian troops into Ukraine. As a result, Poland was inundated with millions of Ukrainian refugees, primarily women and children. Now, we are responding to that in various ways, and the key way will be introduced by Jonathan Mills in a moment. I would only mention that here in Warsaw, last Shabbat, we were happy to come together live, but also be joined by two Ukrainian families who have discovered us and were invited to join us for Shabbat, including a meal and a discussion afterwards. Now, there are other activities that we've been undertaking, such as helping our sister congregation in Lviv. 2 weeks ago, here on this channel, we also held a concert for them where they performed, and we were able to call for support that they so desperately need. And I am happy to report that more than close to $5,000 have been collected for their needs. And we are immediately moving that in full to the community there, and now they know exactly what to do with it. Now, today, we want to focus on the the community and its activity, but also on the specifically on the outreach, which is a humanitarian task that has been launched by our members here. And to do so, we will be asking Dr. Dominika Zakrzewska to give us an overview of our, one would say, flagship activity, which is our training program, step-by-step training program that brings together Jews who have until now had no Jewish education or Jews by choice. And as a main point of our discussion, we will be hearing Jonathan Mills reporting on expansion of a very important program that is addressed to the urgent needs of the refugee mothers and their young children. This is the Childcare or Mobile Childcare Centers program that Jonathan Mills, an American now staying on a long-term mission in Poland, and our long-standing member can report about. Stopping at this point, I hand over firstly to Dominika and subsequently to Jonathan. Dominika, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Marek. It's a pleasure to be here. Good morning, good evening. Let me just start with saying that if there will be any questions, please put them in chat. We will be happy to answer. Let me introduce one of our flagship programs, which we are carrying out for many years right now in Beit Polska, which is a step-by-step program which is basically introduction to Judaism. This program every year has lots of interests from many people around Poland. We have a number of participants this year, actually extraordinarily numerous group, which is 26 people participating in the course, who wish to become Jewish, or actually in a matter of fact, in case of many of them, it's coming back to their heritage, because majority of the people who participate in the program do it because they find out that their families were Jewish, that they have Jewish roots, and that they were disconnected from this heritage, from their family history, due to the historical reasons, mostly during the time of Holocaust and following period of communist regime in Poland. They are finding out as young adults or young professionals usually that this was their heritage, and they want to learn more about it. They want to bring it back. They want to raise their children as Jewish and in a Jewish tradition, in Jewish home. So to give them something that they themselves did not have a privilege to have. And for those people, we are providing a welcoming space where they can come to learn, to become a part of our community. And also to learn within a 2-year long program. The length of the program was decided in quite a long time, because people who are coming to take part in it usually have no Jewish upbringing, and many of them doesn't have previous Jewish education. So we have to provide information from the very basic topics, coming to those more complex ones. We have a number of teachers who are supporting us in this program. So besides me, there are also 2 women rabbis, Małgorzata Kordowicz and Miriam Klimova, who are supporting us in this task. And we can also count on the support of number of visiting rabbis who are volunteering with their expertise and giving study sessions for our members. We also have Mati Kirschenbaum, who is a Polish-born rabbi, graduated from Leo Beck College, who is sponsoring rabbi for the group. And we are very happy that after completing his education, he was willing to actually keep in touch with the community, support us, and become part of the community from which he grew up. We are very happy to have this group, usually of young, active people who are right now about to grow their families. And as Marek was saying about coming back to in-person community life after the pandemic, we also know that it's very important for them to have this space where they can actually socialize and not only get the theoretical knowledge, but also get a chance to learn what does it mean to be a part of Jewish community? What does it mean to be part of Klal Israel? And to create those connections which are helping us to strengthen our identity and our belonging. So this is one of the things that we are focusing our efforts on right now. And as we are having a number of Ukrainian refugees coming to Poland, we also look forward to welcoming those families and to include them, integrate them to our community, to give them a chance to also find a new home for some time or for longer for them. I'm looking at the chat, but I actually see that there is no questions until now. So let me conclude at that point and give the voice to John to talk more about our efforts to support Ukrainian refugees in Poland.
Thank you, Dominika. And if I can put in a plug for anybody that's watching us from Warsaw or from Poland, Friday night services were great in person on last Friday night. And I love that they're live again, and I look forward to seeing everybody there. So just congratulations to everybody for getting those set up live again. That was super. So let me start and talk a little bit about our childcare program. And I thought what I would do is talk a little bit about sort of my history and how I got here, and then explain about our 100 childcare programs in 100 days, creating emotionally healthy children while enhancing the economic independence of Ukrainians living in Poland. So starting, I think talking about me a little bit just sort of helps, is parallel to the overall situation. I moved back to Poland in beginning of March when the war broke out. I last lived in Poland from the year 1990 until August of 2000. The war broke out. I said to myself, I speak a little bit of Polish. I'll come and see what I can do to help. And in the beginning, I did the same ad hoc things that all of Poland was doing. I went down to the border, I picked people up, I drove people to different cities, I went to the train station, the exact same thing that you read about and saw Poles doing everywhere. And that was great, and it was necessary. But then after a couple of weeks, aid in Poland became professional. And that's really important. The multinational or the multinational, international relief organizations started taking over from what had been really just an adrenaline, emotionally motivated relief effort by the individual Poles, and they started to become very structured and added organization where organization hadn't been. And that was really important. So as an example, I like to point out that, where individuals were going down to the borders and driving people back to cities, now there became bus routes, and all of the different borders became almost like bus stops where people were driving, where there were buses and vans taking people to cities throughout Poland and actually throughout much of Europe. And that changed to aid becoming professional, as I said, either by international relief organizations or by Poland itself, by the Polish government, was really important. And then I started to say to myself, what am I going to do while I'm here? How can I help with this effort? And so I went and I met with Marek Zakrzewski, the president of Beit Polska. And I should mention that I was one of the founders of Beit Warszawa, one of the organizations within Beit Polska. I was one of the founders in 1997. We founded it in my backyard when I was living here. So I went back to Marek, and I hadn't been involved with Beit Polska since I left Poland in 2000, so almost, 22 years. And I said, Marek, what can I do to help? And we started discussing what Beit Polska had been doing up to now in terms of relief efforts. And they were doing, and Beit Polska was doing that. We were doing the same things that everyone was doing, mostly ad hoc, very important ad hoc work. It could have been giving gas cards to our members that were driving back and forth to the border. You have to remember that gas here is about $8 a gallon. It's between $7 and $8 a gallon, so it's not cheap to drive 4 hours to the border. So we were sharing gas cards for people going to the border. A school needed help. We were supplying aid to the school. We were doing everything just sort of in a reflexive action, which was incredibly important at that time. But then Mark and I sat down together, and then Haim joined us as well. And we started saying, all right, what can we do if we're going to do this? Let's stop being ad hoc and be very focused. The ad hoc time is beyond us now. Let's be focused and see what we can do. And we started talking about different ways to help in the relief effort. And so we just started making, Mark and I and a few others, we started making a big list. And we said, all right, what can we do? Can we do food and cook for people? Well, World Central Kitchen is doing a tremendous job cooking for everybody. So we crossed that off the list. And then we said, what about housing? And well, housing takes a lot more money than we had, and it also takes knowledge that we didn't have. So we crossed housing off the list. In the newspapers, we were seeing more and more about local governments talking about the need for childcare. Basically, in Europe, childcare is more frequently referred to as full-day nursery or preschool. It's what Americans would often think of as daycare, but it's more school. It's nursery and preschool here, full-day nursery and preschool. And so we started thinking, wow, there's an opportunity. And I happen to have some connections in the world of daycare. And so we started to look at that a little bit more seriously. And we built a team. We built a team of American advisors that included the president and CEO of Bright Horizons, the largest private childcare provider in the United States, the executive director of the National Head Start Association, my friends at Temple Shalom in Newton, Massachusetts, and Lucy, who was just a great advisor to us. And then most important, probably advisor, was frankly my mother, Linda Mills, who is one of the great minds in early childhood education and childcare in the United States, and been a wonderful help to us in organizing a team. And so we started to build this team, and we had a great group of people, but we needed a Polish partner. And so we made a couple of calls, and just like to our international friends internationally, and said, all right, who's the the childcare. We called our team the childcare gurus, and we made a few calls, like, who is the Polish childcare guru? And we found very quickly that a woman named Monika Wozniak, and Monika runs an organization called Fundacja Rozwoju Dzieci, the Foundation for Child Development. And so I called Monika, I set up a meeting with her. And at the time I had with us a rabbi who's been helping us, Rabbi Stephen Balaban, from who was just finishing, getting close to retirement at Annapolis at the Naval Academy, and also happens to be trained in trauma and pediatric trauma and childhood trauma. And so he went with me, and we went and talked to Monika, and we spoke to her for a little bit. And then on the first day, and then the second day, well, our 2-hour meeting became a 5-hour meeting. And then every day thereafter, we were meeting in Monika's kitchen for 5 to 8 hours a day. And we said, okay, we are going to build a network of childcare programs throughout Poland for Ukrainian children. So let's talk about what is the problem. Why do we need childcare for Ukrainians? So first, let's just start with the numbers. 3.6 million Ukrainians have come into Poland. That's like, it's an absurd number. 3.6 million people, almost all of them women and children, and most of the children young children. And so, because remember, all Ukrainian men age 18 to 62 have to stay in Ukraine to fight in the war. And the reality is, while it's officially 18 to 62, you see very few younger teenage males or older men. In fact, it's almost entirely women and children that have come to Poland. So 3.6 million people have come into Poland, and when they come in, they get a small stipend as refugees, but it's really a small stipend. It's not something that you can live independently on. It's a little bit, and we didn't realize how little it was until in our Fundacja Rozwoju Dzieci office, we noticed some of our Ukrainian employees, and we try and employ Ukrainians wherever possible, were skipping meals. And they were skipping meals because at the time, they hadn't yet received their first paycheck from us, and the stipend was so small. And so it's really scary. What are people going to do? And these are people that had a job coming and had paycheck coming. So they receive a stipend. But it's not enough to live on. They also receive what's called a pestle. For people in Poland, all know what a pestle is, but a pestle, if you're outside of Poland, or if you're in the United States, think of it as sort of a cross between a social security card or social security number and a green card. It allows you to work legally. It also provides you other benefits like access to the healthcare system. So refugees receive a pestle. There are jobs available in Poland. There are jobs in all sorts of different sectors, not just what you would think of as sort of historical refugee jobs in sort of the service industry in hotels or restaurants, washing dishes. There are jobs all across the employment spectrum, from service industry to computer programming and software development and high tech. So there's a range of jobs available, but the problem is that even before the war began, there was a shortage of childcare, particularly at the 0 to 5 level, nursery schools and preschools. And so it's really simple formula. There's no childcare, you can't work. And you can't work, you can't be independent. And that's an awful problem, because people were living in tough situations, and in order to really survive and to thrive, you need to be able to work if you want to work. And then add to that, in the few places where there was childcare available, whether it's from the state or private childcare, most programs haven't been set up to deal with the trauma that comes with children coming from Ukraine, children and parents. So, I mean, the reasons for trauma are pretty straightforward. You've got kids and parents, mothers coming that have been witnesses to war. They've been living in the subway. Their homes have been destroyed, their neighbors' homes, their cities. So they've been witnesses to war. Alternatively, one of the very basic problems that everyone has is they're now basically living in a single parent home where they might not have been before. Because remember, there are no husbands here, they're just mothers and children and grandmothers. But it's basically a single parent home. Another reason that we see trauma continuing is that this is the first war that's ever really been broadcast over telephone. And what I mean by that is we see women speaking to their husbands on the phone 2, 3, 4 times a day, and their husbands are in the war. And they could be talking to somebody. I've been watching a woman talking with her husband who's in the middle of a war. It's incredibly present. You know, in the old days when there was a war, you got a letter, you know, a couple of weeks later from somebody, and the person had time to sit down and write it. It's incredibly present, and that being in your face creates trauma. It creates PTSD. It's an awful situation, and it's particularly awful. It's awful everywhere, but it's particularly awful when you're talking about with children. And so when we're building and creating our childcare programs, we're looking at, okay, what can we do to address trauma? And so the issues of trauma and PTSD are varied. It could be children are nonverbal. It could be just the opposite. It could be the kids yell and scream. They could hit. They could cry. There aren't bad kids. Kids aren't bad. They're just coming from an awful situation. And so you need to create programs that deal with that situation. And that's really, really important. So with Fundacja Rozwoju Dzieci, we've created a multi-step program. And the first step was at the very beginning when we opened what we call drop-in centers for mothers who were coming in and needing services. So kids could stop in, they might stop in for an hour, they might stop in for 2 or 3 hours. Then when the parents were when the mother was signing up for her pestle or for a telephone or for therapy, for any of a dozen reasons that they were needing services, and they could stop into our drop-in centers. And that was at the National Stadium, it was at the UNHCR offices, and we were open 7 days a week, 8 hours a day, and at the peak we were seeing 1,400 kids a day on average, in crazy numbers, because the people were just coming in, and they just kept coming in, and those numbers have dissipated. In fact, the center, the National Stadium, is recently closed because there are registrations at other places now. But that was the first step, to open up drop-in centers just to create emergency care, just to help people get settled. But now people are settled. We're 100 and I don't know what the exact number, 110, 115 days in, and so the situation has changed. And so we've been hiring teachers, and there's a question in the chat about languages. And so right now, the teachers that we've hired, that we're training, have 80% of them have come from Ukraine. They speak Ukrainian. About 80% of them have come from Ukraine. We've hired and trained a little bit more than 100 teachers so far. We have another 100 that are in our training program. And as I said, about 80% are Ukrainian, and they speak roughly 75% speak Ukrainian as the first language, and 25% speak Russian as their first language. It depends on where they came from and where in Ukraine they're coming from. And so we're also adding Polish teachers as well, and we will also be teaching Polish in the classes. But as I said, our first step was drop-in centers. Our second step is working with these teachers, the Ukrainian teachers that we've been hiring, and getting set up in what we call a facilitated play group. So that is a group typically with a mother, but not always, and with a facilitator who we've trained, a facilitator or a teacher that we've trained. It's gone through the beginning of our training program. And for our nursery programs, that's typically 2 hours a day. For preschool age kids, that could be up to 5 hours a day. And for the preschool age kids, the parents don't have to be there the whole time. They might go and they might have a job, they might have something to do. There has to be at least one parent there. But it's an important step in getting parents and kids back acclimated to being in a group setting, being part of a community, being involved and working with our team and with our facilitators. It's also important that we've started these facilitated play groups because, for a very basic reason, we could open them quickly. And that's really important. The regulations of opening a childcare center take a little bit, it's a little bit more to get a center open. It takes time because we have parents involved and with the facilitator, but there are parents involved. We are able to open them very quickly as soon as we have our facilitators trained. And that's really important. And so while our facilitated play groups are ongoing, we are getting everything set for full-day nursery program. And to be a teacher in one of our full-day nursery and preschool programs, it's a significant training program. It's 160 hours of training, not a small amount. It's significant. And so we're opening. We've already opened so far, I think we're at 37 or 38 facilitated play groups, and we're opening new ones daily. As we get ready to convert those play groups after 60 to 90 days, those groups convert into full-day nursery and preschool programs. So that's our three-step program. We started with the drop-in centers, we went to the facilitated play groups, and then after that, we went to full-day nurseries and preschools. We are opening them in high density populations. It's really important. We're looking at areas where there are, and not high density Polish population, but high density Ukrainian population. So that means it is we have, right now, I think we have 6 or 7 in Gdansk, several in the greater Warsaw area, Rzeszów, Lublin, Łódź, throughout Poland. And these programs are interesting. I love that Judith is asking questions it's like she's reading my notes before me. So Judith, in your chat, I don't know how you're reading my notes, but it's great. Where are these facilities? These facilities, we are partnering with the local municipalities. I remember I asked the question at the beginning. I said to our Fundacja Rozwoju Dzieci team, I said, how are we going to get space for all of these programs? And they said to me, we're just going to ask the municipalities to give us space. And I kind of looked at them and said, you're kidding, right? This isn't going to work. And as happens frequently, I suppose, I was wrong. I was very wrong, and they were very right. The municipalities want to give us space, and the reason is this: as often happens with governments worldwide, the Polish government has said to the municipalities, "You have to deal with this. This is your challenge to deal with. And you have to do it. You have to provide childcare. You have to provide nurseries. You have to provide preschools." But they gave them no fund. They gave the local municipalities no funding. And so we are solving a problem for local municipalities. We basically let people know, and then the local municipalities, in exchange, we tell them, listen, if you give us space, we will hire the teachers, we will train the teachers, we will run the program, we will pay the teachers, we will look for the psychologists and the psychological service providers, and we will run the program for you for a year. And so we're solving a problem for the local governments, whether it be with the Gmina, which is almost like the equivalent of a neighborhood association, or small towns, or a city. We're solving that problem. And basically most of the centers, not exclusive, not all, but most of the centers are going into what are called Dom Cultori, which are cultural houses. The EU spent billions of dollars building cultural centers, cultural houses within small towns and small cities all over Poland, going back to 2007. And so typically we're going into Dom Cultori, but we're also partnering with local businesses or with local religious organizations. And we are partnering everywhere we can. It's really important that we've got great partners that we're working with. And our partners are the local municipalities. Our partners, as I said before, are also our US friends and advisors, like Bright Horizons, like many of the organizations I talked about, but also international relief organizations. Our first 30 facilitated play groups were sponsored by UNICEF. We have Save the Children is sponsoring some of our next daycare centers. Plan International is sponsoring them. And Beit Polska and Friends of Jewish Renewal have made a great grant to us through their Jan Korczak Children's Fund. And that's been hugely helpful. So, we partner with anyone that sees the value in supporting children. And it's not it shouldn't be difficult. It's imperative. I mean, we're supporting two very important groups. We're supporting mothers and we're supporting their children's. And it's funny because when we file, when we're doing work on often for grant applications, whether it be for an international relief organization, they typically ask, who is the primary recipient? And we don't have one primary recipient, we have two. It's having care for the mother is imperative. Financial independence can't be, and it just can't be overstated how important it is to be financially independent, but it's also important for self-esteem in order to be able to work and not have to be relying on others, on handouts and shopping on the free rack for clothes. Self-esteem is important. It's also important for community. It's funny, it's not funny, it's the wrong word. It's peculiar that 3.5 million people have come in, but often the Ukrainians are alone and they don't know a lot of other people that have come. They came just quickly, and they don't know other people. It's important for a sense of community. I will share a story about a woman I work with and sort of being alone and how she got here. One day I was in the office, and the woman at the desk next to me, she had emptied her backpack onto her desk, and I thought I heard sort of, I couldn't tell whether I was hearing sort of laughing or crying, sort of sniffling. And I turned and I said to her, I said, "What's going on?" This is a 35-year-old Jewish professional woman. She has a law degree, and as of last week, she now has a psychology degree, a master's in psychology. And I said, "What's going on?" And she said, "Well, you know, she had misplaced something." And when she said to me, "Everything's on my desk." And at first it didn't click what she meant. I thought she was just, everything that she was looking for was on her desk. No, what she meant was everything she had was on her desk. She came here from Kiev with a 6-year-old, wonderful, wonderful daughter, but special needs child. They hitchhiked over 6 days from Kiev to Lvov, which is a 350-mile trek. And then they walked and hitchhiked a little bit after staying a couple days with a friend in Lvov, they walked and hitchhiked from Lvov to the border. And she knew nobody here. She doesn't have a community. Having a job has created a sense of community for her. And so without childcare, you can't get a job. Without the job, you don't have that sense of community necessarily. And so I just can't stress enough how important it is for the mothers to have that option if they want it. For the children need, you know, every study you've ever seen, any early childhood education study talks about the importance of early childhood education, helping children learn at an early age. And then you add to that, it's even more important with emotional health. And so with kids coming from situations of trauma, it's important to deal with it now. It's expensive. Our programs run roughly $130,000 to open a preschool, to open a nursery, and $165,000 to open a preschool. I say open. It's to open and to operate it for a full year, each one. And so it's expensive, but it's not nearly as expensive as if you don't do it and you have to deal with it later. Managing the problems later is much more expensive than solving them now, and that's what we're doing. I saw an article. I saw a piece the other day from Choose Love, and if y'all don't know about Choose Love, I recommend you take a look at it. But in their newsletter last week, they were talking a little bit about people returning to Ukraine, and so I was talking with the founder of Choose Love, and what I was discussing was that how I think, and I think many of you have probably seen this, where you've seen on the news, and I've seen this a lot in the American media. They're talking about all the Ukrainians going back to Ukraine. And this is it's true. For the last almost 4 weeks, the number of people going into Ukraine has been roughly equal to the number going from Ukraine into Poland. So it's been just about even. But to say that, oh, they're going back because they feel safe doing so, is a very superficial and I think typically wrong viewpoint. You have to think a little bit about, you know, how people have come in, and so there are, if you look at it, you know, people have come in three waves. The first group came in because they had connections, family, friends. Maybe they had an office in Kiev and an office in Warsaw, and the office said, "We'll take care of you." So that was the, you know, the first group of people that came over. The second group of people that came over were people that came over early in the war. They said the war is coming, and they came over early, and everybody read about all of what the Poles were doing, donating housing, and incredible, just like unbelievable. 1.82 million people came in, and they were being given free housing. I mean, just understand there's 39 million people in Poland, and somewhere between 1.8 and 2 million people just given a room in a house, given a house in the country, given it, just unbelievable, the support. But the problem is that the third wave that came over weren't the early people. They weren't the people that had connections. These were people that were been in the war, the people coming from Donbass or from Mariupol or Kharkiv, or areas where their houses were destroyed and their city were destroyed. These are people whose lives have been turned upside down. And the problem is that when they got here, all the housing that you read about was gone. And it's not anybody's fault. It's just that the numbers are crazy. And so, I mean, just once again, to think about the numbers, think about the size of the United States, which has, I don't know, 300 plus million people, and is bringing in 100,000 people. And Poland is 39 million people, with bringing in, you know, now 3.5 million people. 320,000 Ukrainians now in Warsaw, which is, you know, just a city of 2 million people. So the problem is that this last group got here and are now living in conditions like, you know, in a shelter, but not a little shelter. They're thinking of living in what you think of as a refugee camp. I volunteer occasionally on weekends at one of it's the Expo Center, and it holds 6,000 people, in between 4,000 and 6,000 people in 3 rooms, cot next to cot next to cot. I said they were 3 inches apart, and my son Noah, who was volunteering there this week, said, "Dad, they're not 3 inches apart, they're touching each other." This is horrible. I mean, it's just a tough situation. It's not anybody's fault. Everyone's doing the best they can, but the numbers are incredible. And when I was there, I was working at the drink station, and they've run out of paper cups because they were going through 20,000 cups a day. You know, 4,000 people, 5 glasses of water, that's 20,000 cups a day. And so you had to sign out a plastic cup. You had to bring your paperwork up and sign out plastic cups, and show that you didn't have another cup out. It's incredibly dehumanizing. So when you hear about people going back to Ukraine, many of these people that are going back, the biggest majority, are choosing between 2 lousy options. They can stay here and live in a shelter in many cases, or they can go back. And their thought process, and I've spoken to several people, their thought process is, hey, I can go back. The war isn't there in the area where I'm going to go back. I have a friend in the West or family. You know, maybe once or twice a day we have to go down to there's an air raid siren and we have to go down to the basement. But at least I'm not living in a shelter, which you can do for a couple of days, but you can't do it for months and months. And so they've gone back. And basically what they're doing is they're making, you know, a choice between 2 terrible situations. So to me, why is this, how do I bring this back to what we're doing with creating childcare? We what we're doing is we are helping people to become independent so they don't have to make a choice between two untenable, unfathomable situations. We are creating a system where they can be independent, they can live, they can survive, they can go back to Ukraine when they want to, because it's their choice to do it, because they think it's safe and it's a happy reason to go back, not because it's an unimaginable reason to go back. And that's what we're doing. We're trying to make people's lives better so they can have reasonable choices on how to live. With that, we've got about 7 minutes left, and if anybody has questions, you can put them into the chat, and I'll take a look at them. The first one I see is we already talked about languages, we talked about locations. Besides money, what else can people do to support this project? To me, the most important thing, I mean, yes, money is important. I won't downplay that at all. Money is important. But I think equally important is keeping people aware. I see, I look on CNN or the Post or the Washington Post or the New York Times, and Ukraine is fallen. It's not on top of people's minds. It's not the top subject. It's disappearing. And when it disappears, that's a problem, because then politicians don't think about it. And once again, it goes to money. Money doesn't end up here. So keep talking about it. This is a really, really big deal. Talk about it. Specifically to support our project, if you know of somebody that might be involved or might be interested in helping us, that would have a specific expertise, let us know. We have a wonderful offer. Haim introduced us. Haim and Steve Balaban, Rabbi Steve Balaban from Naval Academy, introduced us to Galena Kuiper, who will be coming, thanks to a grant from Friends of Jewish Renewal and Beit Polska, will be coming to work with trauma and work with us here in Poland, helping us work with both our children and our teachers and our mothers, but also with our teachers. Talk about strange mistakes that you make. We knew that our children in our programs were going to be suffering from trauma. We knew that our parents were going to be. We didn't plan that our teachers also would be suffering from trauma. And so Galena is coming and working with and she's a certified grief and PTSD counselor. And she's coming to work with us. And so that's a big deal. So if you know people that have specific skills, please refer them to us. That's an important question. I'm looking at the next one from Lisa Goldman. Are you asking for donations, or are there other ways Americans? Okay, that's the biggest one for right now, is donations, referrals to people that have specific skills in the childcare or education sector. Those are the biggest ones for us. Beit Polska is in the middle of hiring a volunteer coordinator. This does not have to do with the childcare project, but Beit Polska, thanks to a very nice grant from the Shapiro Foundation, is hiring a volunteer coordinator, because we frequently have requests for how can people come and volunteer. So please stay in contact, write to us, and we will put you in contact with our soon-to-be hired volunteer coordinator as to ways that if you want to come and help, you could come and help. If you want to do other things, we will work with our volunteer coordinator for other volunteer opportunities. Do we have any other questions? Please bring them up. Barbara, Barbara, wonderful to see you here. Barbara, thank you very much for all that you did when you came to Poland. I love everything that you're doing, and I agree that Ukraine fatigue is an issue right now. As well, I'm looking at your question. What can you do as well as skills assessment for the other refugees themselves, so they can have dignity. There are several organizations, Barbara, working with skills assessment and communicating and connecting people with jobs. But right now, as I said, the biggest one is connecting. For us, the biggest issue is it doesn't matter how great their skills are. If they don't have a place for their kids, they can't work. I met last week, and many of us are working together with different organizations, but with a Ukrainian education hub that is doing job training and setting up here in Poland to do job training for Ukrainians. Typically, job training, though, is being done on a municipality by municipality basis and less on a national level. But there are more and more organizations working on job training. That's out of what we are doing, but we're certainly coordinating with them. If any other questions? I'm about done with my time. Haim, am I doing okay on time?
You have presented us with some very powerful reminders that there is a war going on, that there are people suffering, and that we have an opportunity to make a difference through your efforts. I need to let everyone know, if they have not understood it already, that Jonathan has made an incredible difference in the lives of so many people, and his ability to organize, to fundraise, to encourage, and to express with great compassion the needs that are in front of us. I want to just emphasize his last point, which was that many things have interfered with people's attention to this issue. And I invite people to accept the fact that we need to keep our eye on what is happening in Poland. We are, if I could say it in the most direct terms, participating through Jonathan, through Beit Polska, but we're also building a Polish Jewish community that is learning from the example of Jews around the world that are mobilizing to make a difference and to help, along with many other people. And this is an opportunity, a historic opportunity for us as a small community and as a community that's filled with a sense of our responsibility to make a difference. I do want to call your attention to the fact that you can make a donation that will go exclusively to the childcare efforts. Janusz Korczak Childcare on our website, and you just, when you come to the designation point, you should designate that, and we look forward to your generous contribution. This will be posted very soon and available on our website and on YouTube. And we want to thank Jonathan for his efforts. And I do not want to in any way diminish the important role of Dominika Zakrzewska and her work. And I've noted here 2 previous conversations that she has led in the context of helping people understand the importance of Jewish identity in Poland, and the very proud work that she is doing to teach and mentor people in assuming the identity. We see a note here from Mark Yazowski. I was hoping that he could come back to join us and say thank you to Jonathan and Dominika. But one of the other projects that we did, hi Marek, if you could unmute and join us, why don't you read the note you wrote?
I'm not sure whether I'm audible at this moment.
You are.
Okay, because I needed to be returned from the interpretation channel, which I served together with Marzena. So I just briefly mentioned the fact that our focus on children is quite broad. We're looking for let's say, vulnerabilities of the population coming into Poland, Ukrainian population coming into Poland, and trying to focus on this and address ourselves in the long-term fashion. I would not want to take away our attention from the project that has just now been presented, introduced by Jonathan Mills. I just want to add the fact that we have some smaller, earlier efforts that have come to fruition. And one of them was a support for a special needs kids school, a school which opened or ventured to open classes for over 30. They created 30 openings for special needs, special education children from Ukraine. As I said, these are mostly autistic and Down syndrome kids. And of course, bear in mind that they are additionally traumatized and that this is a group that needs particular care and safe environment in which to let's say, come to a sense of security. So we thought this was worth fighting for, and we collected money through Friends of Jewish Renewal in Poland with Haim's strong support. And we have also presented the project to World Union for Progressive Judaism and have collected, as you could see, a total of $25,000, which is which was sufficient for covering of 2 months of expenses for teachers, trainers, and covering for the cost of students being provided for in that school. I was actually invited last Friday, which was the last day of school in Poland. I was invited to a ceremony, closing ceremony for the year, and I was overjoyed to see a group of women and their obviously loved children, and the school authorities very happy and satisfied, and they congratulated us, and I received a special, let's say, thank you note from them. But these needs are real and very down to earth, as we heard from Jonathan. We do need to respond to them. They are very urgent, and hence that is why we're sharing this with you. At this
Friends, we will be in the future reporting back to you and keeping you updated and keeping you informed. And we want to thank Jonathan Mills, Dominika Zakrzewska, Mark Izowski, one of our translators, Marjana Szymanska, and I want to thank all of you for your participation today. Please remember that we are in a situation that demands our responsibility and our response. Good day and best wishes.